Ever since the Jedi Order was declared as traitors by the Galactic Empire, many of the survivors has spread out in the galaxy to remain hidden from the Empire from hunting them down. Many of the survivors had heard the news stories about some survivors had been hunted down by the Empire, turned in, either been killed or turned into servants of the Empire. One of the survivors was a Jedi Knight by the name Jataro. Jataro was not part of the. He actually was on his way back to Coruscant when he heard about the war has ended, but he managed to survive before even he was brought back to even before he had even approached Coruscant. He received news that the Empire of the Republic had had declared the Jedi Order as traitors to the Republic. And with that news, he knew if he even returned to Coruscant, he would be executed as a traitor. So rather than returning back to the Jedi Temple, he decided to leave. Rather from that time, he decided to find a place where he can remain hidden. So for the next several months after that, he traveled from different planet in order to again stay alive. But he had to abandon his old Jedi robe so that not being detected. So he managed to get some new clothes and to be acting as just a civilian. And he always makes sure never to use the force because that will only draw attention. Because even though that he traveled to different planets, each of those planets he came to, he noticed there were Imperial presence, forces, soldiers on every single planet. And he knew that would be very different, very, very risky if he stayed on each of those planets in a longer period of time, with the risk that he might be recognized or be found out he a survivor of the Jedi Order. So he decided to live somewhere far as away as possible from any major hyperspace lane and from any of the major populated planets in the galaxy. He managed to track down a small outskirts planet where he settled down, and this planet was in fact not even had any settlements on it, and he felt safe there. So for the next 9 years, he spent his time on this planet. But one day, he actually saw a ship above of his settlement, and he was worried this was in fact an Imperial ship, or at least maybe a scout. And that if that was an Imperial scout, he was worried that he may have been discovered by the Imperial, or at least the Empire, and that almost had living on this small planet for nearly a decade in peace. And that he had really hoped to remain there for many years more. But now he saw this small ship in the air that flew over his settlement. He was worried that might be a small Imperial scout. So he decided to follow that small ship in a close distance just for, for to just be sure if that wasn't an Imperial or maybe someone else. After he managed to track down the ship was located. And in fact, it wasn't even any Imperial ship that he was aware of. But he didn't take any chance for it to be risked that. So he still remained hidden. But when he saw a young woman, probably around the same age himself, walked out, and she was not even wearing any signs of Imperial uniform or armor, and she was apparently alone. She was looking around for if there was any signs of any people, and she was actually just looking around on her ship. And it turned out some of her ship actually seemed to be taking some damage. Even that she seems to be alone, but living on the planet for 9 years, completely insulated from the rest of the galaxy, he had no idea what has happened around the galaxy for that nearly for a decade. So he decided to approach this woman. When he actually walked up to her ship, she was startled. She pointed her weapon out against him, but he lifted his arm up and said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Don't shoot! Who are you?" she asked. Uh, and he said his name is Jataro, and he lives on this planet. She was actually never expecting that this planet was even to be inhabited by someone. She asked if there was anyone else who lived there, and he said, "No, I'm the only one who lives here in a small farm, not too far away from here." And he then said that he noticed her ship has damage. He asked if she had been in some sort of fight or something else. She explained that she was passing through the system when this asteroid, or at least a part of the asteroid belt in the system, had damaged her ship, and she needed to land to make some repairs. And of course, it turns out she didn't have any of the spare parts to fix it. Then he offered her to take parts from his ship that he still had in order to maybe to fix her damage of hers. But she was not even sure if his ship had any compatible parts to hers. But he said, "What do you have to lose? If that damage is on your ship isn't even repaired, who knows what else worse you can get?" And he actually had a point, and she realized that. Because she didn't even know how far the damage could be. And who knows if she will take off, what if that system that she's, even in her mind, maybe it wasn't that particularly dangerous or serious. But what if the damage was so what if the damage was so severe, and just by taking off it could be go critical and perhaps even explode and cause the ship to crash. And that was the one thing that she didn't want to risk. So he offered her to take her back to his own small farm, and even though she preferred to be staying behind by her ship, but he informed her there aren't any other people on this planet, only himself. And there hasn't even been any other ships have been through the system for years. So she agreed. Even though on her way back to his small farm, she asked him where he is from originally. He explained that he is from Coruscant, but he has been living on this planet for nearly 9 years. She was so surprised that he had been living on this planet for so long, and he asked her what has happened in the galaxy over this time, since he had been cut off from galaxy for nearly a decade. She explained some of the details and at least some things has happened in the galaxy over the time, like how much more the Empire had taken over, and there are some people who is fighting against the Empire, or at least small remnants of the separatist holdouts and something like that. And there was just he was surprised that people actually were fighting against the Empire, and he asked her for her opinion about this Empire. If she thinks this is good as this claim to be better than the Republic. And she explains that she doesn't even know much about the Empire because she travels a lot and she prefers not to stay in one place too long. But in her opinion about the Empire itself, she preferred not to be involved with the Empire. But she believes that the Empire was terrible. She was in fact missed the old Republic. In fact, even though the Republic was corrupted, but it was always been helping the people of the galaxy. But the Empire has been silent those who were speaking against them, and even attacked and destroyed civilian settlements across the galaxy if they were even opposed in the Empire. And he was surprised that there were people actually been doing this. But then he asked from what world she is from. She explained that she is in fact from Corellia, and her family had been Corellian pilots for at least a number of generations. He was impressed. And when they actually came to this small farm, she did notice this big small wooden house and this ship that was hidden in some sort of looks like a wooden, like a small barn. And he then showed her to his ship, and he said that she can take any spare parts that she needs, or if there's any, or if any of the parts are even compatible. She looked through the ship, and she in fact did notice a ship, even though that Yataro's ship was only a few years older than her own. The parts were still compatible. After that, and just before that, when she was going back to her ship, he actually had offered her to stay for dinner, even though she was about to decline when he actually heard her stomach was growling of hunger. I mean, and homemade food. That is all I can offer for you after this compensation for you. Well, she thought about it, but she agreed. But she promised to come back after she had repaired her ship. Even that he even there was another chance that she just will just take off and never return. But there was nothing else he can do about it because he couldn't even force her. But after that, he actually had been making his dinner. He heard a knock on the door and he opened it, and it was in fact Rolina. She was in fact still hungry, and she explained she didn't have much rations or supplies on her ship, so any type of food would be at least enough for her. They both sat down and they started talking, but then, middle of dinner, Jataro made a simple mistake by using the force when he dropped his own, when his mug was about to fall to the ground, when he grabbed it by hand and he realized he had just used the force in front of Rolina, a total stranger that he just only met but maybe had is at least an hour earlier. She asked him if if he was a Jedi, and he had no idea what to do because he really didn't know what else to say to even tell the truth or just saying that he wasn't a Jedi, but he at least knows how to use this force. He was born with it, and that. But he told her the truth. He was expecting that she might telling her that you are traitor to the Empire, but she didn't. And in fact, she then told him she very much enjoyed hearing the stories about the Jedi Knights or the Jedi Order before the Empire, even before the Clone Wars. Hearing all stories of how they stopped battles across the galaxy, how they made peace over generations. She had really hoped maybe that if she would have the Force sensitive, she would have been a great Jedi Knight, or at least maybe something. So she asked him if he was Jedi Knight or a Master, and he explained that he was a Jedi Knight. And then he told her the entire story that he was on the way back to Coruscant after after the Clone Wars had been declared over, but he never actually returned officially. Rather from returning back, he left. He mentioned that he had received a message from another survivor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, telling him to avoid Coruscant at all costs. Ever since, though, he had never come across any other survivors, but he heard that there were a number of other survivors that did survive, but other being hunted down by the Empire, killed, or turned over to dark side as his servants to the Empire. And he didn't want to be doing that. So he decided to leave and find some place that he could remain safe for a long time. After dinner, though, Rolina actually offered her service. Actually offered Jataro a chance to go with her on this travel on her ship. He was actually surprised. Like, why? And she explained that she believes that the empire is not the legitimate ruling government, along with the others. And ever since he actually gave her parts from his own ship to fix her own. And he actually said that he needed at least maybe had to think about it. And she said that she would be leaving by the next day, so it would give him some time to think. So after dinner, she said goodbye and she went back to his own ship, to her own ship. But that evening, as Yataro was laying in his own bed, just thinking, just thinking if he actually should accept her offer or remain on this planet. Even though he still had a still functioning ship, so he could have left the planet even during his 9 years of staying on this small planet. But he had preferred to be staying there to be safe. But now, a young woman had actually offered him to join her as a part of a crew and explore the galaxy, perform jobs around the galaxy, and perhaps help others. So he thought about it, and then he actually did agree. Even though he considered that this time he first didn't know exactly what to say, but he actually did admit that he was curious. So by the next morning, he actually went to her ship and said he would gladly to take the offer. So he went back to his own farm and packed some of the things that he would needed, at least his old lightsaber and a holocron that he had, and some other things that he had gathered over his time. And then he took off. So the rest of the next couple of weeks after that he had joined with Rolina, Jataro started to wonder if this was the right decision. But after traveling around the different parts of the galaxy that he hasn't even been in a long time, traveled to different worlds like Shirilla to Dak, the home world of the Mount Calamari, and even has been back to Coruscant after such a long time, and even to Corellia. But still, he had maintained to be his persona as just an ordinary citizen. Even though he came across the Imperial forces over time, but he has always been avoided being detected by them. Even after such long time, for even though that he actually started to like Rolina. Rolina and Jataro, their friendship actually grew stronger as they traveled around the galaxy. But there were a lot of things that they hadn't even encountered. They tried to avoid any detection by any of the Imperial forces, especially to the fact that Jataro used to be a Jedi. And even if Rolina had been discovered that she was holding or she was having a Jedi survivor among her crew, she would have been a much deeper risk also. But she didn't even care because she actually liked him. And even after being had been together for nearly had been friends for nearly 14 years afterwards, they actually had started to be developing feelings for each other. But then, after 14 years as a part of the crew, they actually heard the news. Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine were dead. They were dead, and the Empire had fallen. They were actually so amazed that the Empire was finally gone, and the Emperor was gone. And just barely about a year later, or at least some time after the Empire had fallen, the New Republic had happened. Because during these 14 years in the traveling around the galaxy, they even provided some of that service to the rebels, like providing for some supplies and even some information. Even though they took, even though both of them actually took a big risk in this, but they wanted to make a difference in the galaxy, especially Yotaro, especially for him, knowing that ever since his old order had fallen and the Empire took over the galaxy, he wanted to make a difference. He wanted to spread hope throughout the galaxy, telling them there are people who would do anything against the Empire's rule. And they were actually happy to know that during now, 14 years later, the Empire was completely gone. And even though, despite that, the New Republic had taken over, they could continue to travel around the galaxy for a number of years. But even despite it hasn't happened, it wasn't until like 7 years later when Jataro and Rolina heard about Luke Skywalker's restart of the new Jedi Order on Yavin 4, and that he was inviting any survivors or any force sensitive people to join him to be part to be trained as a Jedi. He actually now had an opportunity to go back to as a Jedi. But he decided to wait because now he had been living among with Rolina for this time. And just only about a year earlier, he actually got married with Rolina on Corellia. And they actually loved this. It wouldn't be until another 2 more years before he had decided to actually join Luke's order on Yavin 4. He revealed this to Rolina, but she was not against this entire idea in anyways. She was actually proud that he wanted to join the new Jedi Order to bring back the old Order's peacekeepers, and even teaching them some of the old Jedi's techniques, history to the new generation. Even though that he was force sensitive, but she was happy to at least recognize that he was now a great part of the new Jedi Order. So he actually joined them. While he was there on Yavin 4 training new Jedi's, Rolina traveled around the galaxy by herself, even though she didn't mind it. After all, she did that even before she met Jataro. She traveled around the galaxy for a number of years, number of months, and she even returned back to Yavin 4 to see her husband, to see how his training and his teaching has been going. But after she had been traveling around the galaxy for nearly a year, or at least for about a few months, when she returned to Yavin 4, she explained that she had something to tell Yataro. She told him they were going to have a baby within the next few months. And Yataro, he was really excited, even though that he knew that the Jedi Order in the old order was forbidden to have any involvement in like marriage or family. But now when the new Jedi Order had been taken over, had then been happened, marriage, families were allowed. And now we was told that he was going to have a baby within a few months. He was overjoyed. And for that, he decided to leave the new Jedi Order to be with Rolina. And Luke Skywalker, he had actually understood But he said that he will keep in touch with the Order Jedi, with the new Jedi Order from time to time to see how things has been going on. So over the next couple of months, they actually was told they were going to have a boy. And then the day came where the son was born. They had named their son Desali, and even at age 5, they both discovered that their own son was in fact force sensitive. Even that Jataro was really happy to have a son who was force sensitive, like himself. And he wanted to teach his own son. So he took Desali as his own apprentice. And for the rest of the next couple of years, in fact, he traveled around the galaxy with his own son to learn him about the Jedi ways and even visit some old temples and other outposts that had even been found by the Empire years earlier, knowing that the Empire destroyed every single evidence about the Old Order, but they had missed some of them. And when his son was about 12, he had decided he wanted to join the new Jedi Order, and when he told his dad that, he didn't mind. Because he was actually very happy that his son had embraced the teaching of to be a Jedi. So when Sally had actually joined the new order, he had actually already by the age of 13, he had only been showing a great deal of progress to be a Jedi. Even when Luke, he was in fact impressed of how much his skills and the skill of the lightsaber and even some of the teachings when he explained that his father was in fact Jataro. Then he revealed that Jataro were in fact old member of the new Jedi Order. And for the rest of the time, and even though the Sally, he actually got very close to other Jedi Knights like Lubaka, even the Solo twins, for example, and he even took part of the Yuzong Bong War and survived it. And at some point in his life, he even got married and had at least two daughters of his own. Actually, one of them turned out to be a force sensitive. And even 4 years after that, Jataro and Rolina had their son, Desali, they found out they were expecting another baby, a daughter, which they named Danila. Danila actually was also force sensitive like her older brother and her own father. And in fact, she was really impressed about hearing the stories about the old Jedi Order from her mother and her father. She was very eager. She wanted to be a Jedi like her own father. But even that her eagerness to be a Jedi could be led to many mistakes during her training. But even though Yataro was very patient, he taught her how to be respectful to others and not to be very eager as she were, but only to be patient. When she was about 6 to 7 years old, he had actually, Danila had asked if she could be trained by the famous Luke Skywalker at Yavin 4, and even her parents were at first a little bit skeptical about this idea. After all, she was just 7 years old. And even that her parents were first not much against, were a little bit against the idea of sending her their only daughter to Yavin 4 to be trained. But after all, she had showed a lot of progress during her studying under her teaching under her father and her older brother. She had actually shown that it would be a natural and in the force training and the force techniques like her brother. So overall, Rolina, who was still very skeptical and was very not much happy about the idea, but then, as around the time when her older brother, who was in fact also want to go, even though when even Danila wasn't allowed to go in the end, they decided to keep her training under her father at least for a number more years until she was a bit older. Even that she was a bit angry about this decision. But her father promised that he will take her to Yavin 4 to see Luke Skywalker when she is a bit older. And in fact, she didn't even go to Yavin 4 to Luke Skywalker's training until when she was like 12, like herself, like her brother when he went. But but during that time, well, even the next few years after that being decided, she had more training by her father and her brother, and she was more skilled. And despite that, she had a lot more training from Luke Skywalker and some other Jedi Knights and Masters who joined the Order. And she was very happy. But during the Yunzong Vong War, she was in fact not involved in the battles or anything. Her parents, when they found out about this Yuzong Vong War race, or in this war was going on, they actually managed to find the daughter and kept her safe, traveling around the galaxy along with her parents during the time of the war. But they were actually aware that their own son was in fact involved in war, but even they wanted to stop him, try to find him, but it was too late. He was too much involved in the battles and like that. So, but they were happy that he survived. And Danila, she was allowed to go back to the Order after the war was over and continue her training to one day she was knighted as Jedi Knight. And at some point in her life, she actually got married when she was about 25. And she had two daughters and one son, all of them force sensitive. But only one actually decided to join the new Jedi Order. The other two, they decided they want to be something else. Jataro was actually very happy that he ran into Rolina on a small planet all those years ago. He actually never expected to be finding someone else to be with, even though he was following the old Jedi Order code by heart. But after the old Jedi Order had been declared as traitors and he had to remain living on a small planet in isolation for at least for nearly a decade, until he ran into, or at least met, Rolina, who came to his own small planet. But even their bond as friendship, but as their friendship grow to even something more, into a romance. Even it was very hard for him to even to disobey the Jedi code, but he followed his heart rather than the code at that time, and he made the right decision. And especially when he got married with Rolina, both were actually got really happy to be with the one they loved the most. And especially when he found out that the new Jedi Order had been formed, and he actually didn't hesitate to train the Order of the new Jedi's, but especially having two children, a son and a daughter, with Rolina. He was really happy though, and especially Rolina. She couldn't have been happier to have found someone like Jataro. Found someone who is brave, strong, very confident, but even cautious in some cases. She actually thought that he was very quite handsome from his age. After all, they were around the same age. But there was something else that actually drew her to him, or at least the romantic feelings. That was in fact his pilot skills, mechanical skills, and that he was always honest. That was something that drew her to him. She was really happy to have and actually have found him on that small planet all those years ago, and she was happy to have been married with him and have a small family with him also. She couldn't have asked for a better person to be with. And this is how Rolina and Yataro found a true love, got a big family. The end.